Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack, and the other David Harris from the Cheese Room is going to be joining me. My David Harris on this channel has been very sick this week, so I've gotten David Harris deprived. I'm going through David Harris withdrawals right now. I've decided to fill in, the other one from down under, see what he can do, see if he can, satisfy my need. But we're going to be discussing today whether maybe Daniel Levy is kind of on the right track once again, or really just in general, whether Spurs are kind of on the right track again. And this sort of comes from maybe a conversation I had last year, actually, with somebody on a podcast, David, where I sort of said, are Spurs in crisis mode, which seemed to have been sort of the nature of the conversation a lot last season. Which crisis are Spurs going through now? Which one will they be going through next? And now all of a sudden it's like, when will there be another crisis? It feels like there's no crisis on the horizon right now. So I thought we kind of just discuss whether maybe Spurs are right on the back or are on the right direction. Once again, we're on top of the league in the case of the men's team with all the youth teams. So, Mr. Harris, I'll ask you, do you think Spurs are all of a sudden kind of headed in the right direction again? Or is this getting a bit ahead of myself?
What a great question that is for 6:09 on a Friday morning. I think that are Spurs on the right track? One may argue they couldn't go on a worse track than the one they've been on, if you know what I mean. Because your question about the fact, are Spurs in crisis last season? You've got to look at it. I think there was 3 first-team coaches last year in one season. We had a director of football that started making amateur hotel room videos and then banned from doing what he needed to do. You had a situation where the fans' right to voice their disapproval at full time was drowned out by the seminal Manchester group, the Stone Roses, Fool's Gold. And you look at that on a piece of paper and you think to yourself, I think I was working this out when that goal went in at Southampton away. I think we went 3-1 up, didn't we?
Yeah.
And Conte and Mason and Stellini were hugging each other. That was a real sliding doors moment because we'd have gone third or we'd have kept third. And where did we end up? 8th. So are we on track? We're back on the track. Is how I put it.
That's actually what I had in the thumbnail, so I'm glad that I, at least got some sort of answer out of you that might be somewhat in agreement, because that's sort of what I had there was Spurs back on track, ? Or I might even put an exclamation point because I'm already believed that we're there. But you kind of look at it where Spurs last season, it felt like we just had a host of problems that we had to list about. It was like, there's no leadership in the squad. There's no accountability. The recruitment seems to all be wrong. The academy is dead, right? That was one of the things we kept ranting about was like, why is it that we have nobody of our own even to choose from or even to rely upon when times usually get tough, usually with most clubs? You feel like, most fans, they do kind of get around some of their young, they kind of get around some of their own where, like if you're not even having a great season, at least you have a guy from the academy that seems to be on the rise or seems to sort of at least give his all for the badge, all those sort of kind of cliches, right? We weren't even having any of that last season. The guys from the academy were Tanganga, Oliver Skip, and Harry Winks, and those were the ones that we had produced, over a couple of seasons. It's not like they all came at the same time. Like those were our best academy products of at least the last 3 to 4 years or something like that. And now when you look at this academy, it's listed, or at least it's rated as one of the most talented across the country, from the under 21s all the way through the under 18s. That kid Mikey Moore is probably the most talented English international for his group. You look at Jamie Donnelly, a bit similar, Dorrington, a bit similar, even like our goalkeeper, that Gunter guy, I think seems to be like a starter for the under 21 England team quite regularly. It's kind of funny when you even see the squad announcements of the England under 21s. It's like about 5 or 6 Spurs players, sometimes even in the starting lineup. And you now kind of think a lot of these problems, a lot of these sort of crises that we used to kind of speak about, it's as if within a year, or not even a year, like less than 6 months, all of a sudden we're kind of in the opposite direction. We're actually heading towards a positive direction in it. And so it kind of makes me think, maybe is this because of just getting rid of an Aconte, just getting rid of previous leaders, or is it that Daniel Levy, David Harris, is starting to make maybe some right decisions, bringing in Ange Postecoglou, starting to maybe focus more on the academy, trying to revitalize it, right? He brought in Paratici and some of his sort of men like Steinson and guys like that to sort of change the whole ethos, bring in some more kind of expensive talents and whatnot, go against kind of the old mentality of, young, hungry players. And I think it seemed like a bit of a risk, but ended up working out for us. What do you make of the fact that maybe Daniel Levy is perhaps starting to get some decisions right?
What a loaded question you sent my way, and I appreciate
Am I
you
giving him too
sending
much
me.
credit too quickly as well, right? He makes two decisions maybe right in a row, and now all of a sudden, like he's on the thumbnail.
Oh, well, it's only been 22, 23 years, so you're telling me two decisions right in a row out of 22,
It's a good
23
batting
years.
average.
It's a very good batting average, and you're a very forgiving and patient person, far more than I am. I think there's quite a lot to unpack in what you're saying there, Jack, and it's very interesting because if you look at last season and you look at the culture of the club last season, it was appalling. And you have to bear in mind that when you hire the win now coaches, when you hire the coach who you've got to back, when you hire the coach who's really not going to play the youngsters or blood the youngsters, then when you get to the end of days with them, it's going to be really toxic. Think about the end of Conte's days at Chelsea. He was still turning up to training with his staff. Sarri had been appointed, all ready to go, and he was told by his lawyers, "You turn up." And he took Chelsea to industrial tribunal and he won, right? So that's how that goes, yeah. And you contrast it to, I mean, it's very, you compare it to this time last year, we're more or less in the same position. I think we're now 3 points better off. And last year, the mentality was at the time, we've had a great transfer window. I didn't quite agree with that. We had had the best start since 63 or something like that. We're not playing very well. We're getting the results. It'll all click into gear at some point, and it never did. So you've got to look at that context in the first place. Yeah.
Do you
Then you go.
No, like what do you mean by like the context in that it almost was we started making mistakes first in order we kind of just had to correct them? Is that what you mean kind of by the context?
What I mean by the context is look how bad it was last year.
Mm,
As in, well, yeah, look, this time last year, I think that we were feeling, you know what, we're in a situation. I honestly thought at the start of last season that we would get a good chance of third because Chelsea were in turmoil and continue to be so. And Arsenal had really kind of blown fourth place, and we felt psychologically they would be suffering for it, and we were
right.
wrong there, right? So you got those are all your context, right? And then you get to the end of the season where it was poisonous atmosphere, and really for the first, there's only been two or three times where the disgruntlement with Levy and Enid has really been kind of more found in the stadium, right? And I remember the last Nuno game,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the whole kind of situation with the Super League
Yep.
really is it other and many other times he's kind of gotten away with it, right? And therefore, what I'm saying to you is that where they're in a position of they've got no director of football. They've hired this guy Scott Munn, who can't start until recently,
Just
right?
quick tangent though, is
And
that another right decision in a row? Because Spurs fans were kind of asking for another director of football, even if they wanted Paratici to stick around. Everybody was saying, for the face of it, for the look of it, we have to sign a new technical director to make it look like we know what we're doing. And he answered that call.
but so Scott Munn's the director of football
Mm,
operations. So he is running the football operations for men
supposed to be.
and women's team. The whole infrastructure is him, right? Then this guy that we've hired this week from Aston Villa is what they're calling the technical director, not the director. No, whatever he is, technical something or another. And he's running the whole scouting data, whatever you want to call it, and that kind of thing. And then you've got Ange, right? Now, what I'm loving about Ange is the fact that he did that interview with Gary Lineker, and I'm pretty sure, or in one of the press conferences, he said, "Make no bones about it, he was one of the last choice." to get the gig, right? So he wanted Nagelsmann, and thank God he didn't get him. I'll dust off the old German AVB reference one last time for you, which I know you love. And then you've got Nagelsmann, Slot, who I was quite excited about Slot coming in. I had no problem with that whatsoever. And then we got Ange. Now, I remember at the time on Twitter or X, or what it's called now, there was this petition, an online petition against Ange. Why are we getting this obscure Australian in who was at Celtic and this, that, and the other? Now, obviously, having lived down here on and off for a number of years, I knew who he was. I knew what he was about. And his golden opportunity has come in relatively late in his career. And I'm calling him the avuncular Australian because what he has done, and I knew he would do this, is that he's brought in the Australian sporting culture into that club. And my God, they needed it, right? So the Australian psyche, the nature of the country, sport, and excellence of the sport and the culture of sport and bringing teams together is a real strong feature of the culture here. And that is what he's done. And he is like, I likened it at the start of the season to another Martin Yole point. Club's in disarray, and there's a guy who brings the whole thing together through the sheer weight of his personality. Yeah. And I think that has been huge. What I've been really surprised about him on the upside is about two or three things. One, everyone has said that wherever he's gone, it's been a slow start,
Right.
And it hasn't been. Two, I was expecting him to be gung ho the whole time. What I'm really enjoying about him is his in-game management so far. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I don't quite agree with, but he's been pragmatic. He's brought in Højbjerg when he's needed to. Yeah, Perisic, I think, is going to be a real miss now. I really believe that because you brought him on for his kind of game experience, and the only person who may get a goal out of Richarlison has now disappeared for a year. Yeah, and it's that kind of pragmatism that he's done that
He's a
I've been
problem solver.
really. Yeah, he is, because I was just expecting 112 minutes of gung ho football, and it's not been like that. Yeah,
No.
and I think that where he's been really good is that he's been very on the culture and making sure the players are reconnecting with the fans. We can all see that, can't we? And I think that's been fantastic.
Are you
And
maybe
going
just
back, you're gone.
No, I was going to say, are you kind of suggesting that in the past, right, he was seen as, I wouldn't say if stubborn is the right word, but I am going to use it, when in Australia, like in the World Cup, right, he still kept playing kind of no matter what, the most progressive style he could, even if he didn't really exactly have sort of the players to get over the line with it. He sort of stuck to his principles, stuck to his guns, and maybe this time around with Spurs, you feel like he's maybe come across a bit more clever in kind of how he's gone about it. Like he's still sticking to his principles of attacking football and everything, but like you said, he's incorporated players like a Højbjerg. He's made substitutions of guys like an Oliver Skip. He, started the first game of the season with Emerson Royale, at starting right back, right? He's made
Yeah,
sort of maybe decisions that you wouldn't have expected, since you obviously knew maybe a bit more about him than some of us did, right? You've seen some
yeah,
of his time in Australia where I think
yeah.
I've heard from reports sometimes he came across as a bit stubborn or a bit kind of too narrow-minded on kind of his own
Mm.
way of doing things.
Well, there's a great interview of him on YouTube with another ex Aussie player, a guy called Craig Foster, who's a
That's
who's a
right.
pundit. And if you've seen it, he has a massive row with him, right? And you know what? I love that. I think it's fantastic, right? Um, so yeah, no, to your point, I'm saying that I'm surprised. What I've been surprised about is that there's that in-game pragmatism, which I wasn't expecting, right? And maybe you saw it at Celtic, I'm not sure. There was talks about, in the Champions League, he went away and he got stuff, but they gave him a game and this, that, and the other. But what he's doing with this is that he's doing that as well. So if we go back to Mr. Levy, who famously said, "We've got our Tottenham back" at the hastily convened fan forum after 6 years since the last fan forum when we were riding high in the league. Am
6-year
I a cynic?
postponement.
Yeah. Am I a cynic? Maybe. Yeah, of course I am. And there was Burnley away. Remember Burnley away, when the away fans started singing "We've got our Tottenham back," and it shot straight to Levy, and he was a little smile on his face. Whereas if you remember the last home game of the season when his missus was patting his hand in comfort, I think that Ange has, you know, Ange at the same time was saying, "Well, mate, I was the last choice,"
Yeah,
has come in
I was going to
and
ask, like,
gone,
did he luck out, Daniel Levy? Because I'm trying to credit him for maybe making right decisions, but
mm,
I think there's probably two ways of looking at it. Either he got lucky with Ange
mm,
Postecoglou and is just reaping the rewards of a lucky decision. Some people even believe that with
mm,
Mauricio Pochettino, right? That wasn't even his original choice. Went with sort of the backup one, and the backup choice ended up
yeah,
being the better one. Often the case that is actually happens with football clubs. Sometimes the second or third choice manager actually ends up being the good one. But do you think
yeah.
that's what happened with Levy? He just sort of lucked out, not even any skill involved or any sort of real, tact or any, tactfulness in it?
Well, look, there
Did he
are
just
some of
stumble
my
upon him?
there are some of my fellow cheeseheads, as you know, or other channels as well, who seem to think that I'm very, very negative and very negative about Mr. Levy, and I've got nothing to credit him for. So I'll continue on the same theme here. In terms of lucking out, Daniel has got no idea when it comes to football matters. The dangerous thing is he thinks he does, but he doesn't. And his track record shows that, right? And if you look at the 22, 23 years, yeah, you look at his decent managerial appointments. So I think the first team that excited you was Harry Redknapp's team, yeah?
Hmm.
So we were slam at the bottom of the league, 2 from 8, as we all know, and Harry Redknapp was brought in to save us from relegation. And getting to the Champions League was way above the expectation of the board and where we were. And as you can see in the Nelson Saha window, okay? So that's one good appointment. I don't think we can argue. Martin Yole was someone who I think, if you talk about getting our Tottenham back, Martin Yole.
Was the man.
So Martin Yole was the assistant to Jacques Santini, who lasted a shorter amount of time than Nuno, I think.
Hmm.
Okay, and he went back. He resigned because his mother-in-law wasn't well. I think his mother-in-law was perfectly fine, and he went, and Yol was there, and then he came, and again, like Ange, an avuncular person brings the culture and the connection and this, that, and the other. Because the noughties, we were awful, right? And he did. So that's two sound choices. The Conte was the best managerial appointment that he's ever made. Now, I can see the look on your face, and the C word is such a triggering word for the Tottenham fan base at the moment.
Mm.
But hear me out. The bloke had just won Serie A. He'd won the league with Chelsea, and he won the cup, didn't he, in his second season? He was out of work. He just won a major title. And everyone cries their eyes out about Conte. The first half of the season, that second half of the season when he came in and he took over from Nuno, we were playing decent
Yes.
counter-attacking football. Kulusevski's best spell at the club was then. I think he's played 2 decent games since. And so when we talk about lucked out, I would say that's what we got: Ange, Redknapp, Yol, Conte, 4 managers, and there's been a load in 22 years. So lucked out, he has.
Mm. I feel like what he's kind of starting to do, though, is maybe he's starting to reap the rewards of kind of maybe making right decision after right decision. Because what you can do is you can
Yeah.
make one wrong decision, but then you meet it with a right decision. It sort of often balances out, but you never really go anywhere with it. For now, it just seems
Mm-hmm.
like he has decided to go back to his original principles, which are maybe more just attacking football, make Spurs fans
Mm.
happy to see what they're watching on either the television over here in the US or what they're
Yeah.
experiencing in the stadiums. They want to be entertained
Yeah.
and they want to be proud of the football that they're playing without making many sacrifices. Because it felt like before with Conte and Jose, we were sort of making the sacrifice of, not seeing the most aesthetically pleasing football for the sake of
Mm-hmm.
being at the top of the league. Because when we were with Jose as well as Conte, I think around
Yeah.
this sort of stage of the season, we were still challenging at the very top of the league, and we still were seen as one of the better contenders for maybe a league title challenge, or at least, maybe for the top spots. And it eventually came to just ruin itself where maybe he wasn't backed enough for whatever reasons, right? The managers didn't work out, but we ended up kind of making those sacrifices to try to be at
Yeah.
the top, to try to sort of change our ethos
Yeah.
as a club. And now he's decided, I guess, and he's even admitted to it in that recent sort of a fan, sort of a forum, that maybe I
Mm.
made a mistake, or he didn't really say I made a mistake, but he said maybe
Mm.
we made a mistake in going for win now managers and thinking that they could deliver us, quick and, easy results that, would give
Mm-hmm.
us that satisfaction that we've been looking for a long time, trophies and just being at the top of the
Mm.
table and being the team that
Mm-hmm.
everybody's jealous of. And now we're kind of
Yeah.
going back to what is probably to the drawing board and just realizing that's not really who we are. It's not really what we're good at. Also, because Daniel Levy,
Mm.
in my opinion, wasn't really willing to go full in, full into bed with Jose and
Mm.
Conte and get what they really needed done. So now we're back to
Mm-hmm.
what we, in a way, have always been sort of good at, which is buying young players, buying unproven players that can come up and
Yeah.
end up being, the household names of the team as well as of the Premier League. And we're also going
Mm.
towards, maybe, even though we're at the top of the table, we haven't made that sacrifice, or we haven't conceded, something in order to get to the top of the table. We've just brought in a manager that is going to be playing and employing the right type of football that we as Spurs fans sort of had fallen in love with this club. And then
Yeah.
also we're now seeing more of a integration of the academy. They're not being used as training cones anymore. We're not buying
Yeah.
33-year-old guys on 400,000 a week, to just come in here.
Yeah.
Even though we love Perisic, that was a very Conte type signing at the time, right? More
Yeah.
kind of,
Of course.
and even the Arnaut Danjuma signing was like such a Conte signing, just kind of a bit of an ageism, kind of thing. And these were all things that we were sort of sacrificing, I think, in order to believe that we would be at the top, to believe that this would mean we would get trophies, and didn't end up
Yeah.
working out for us for whatever reason. And now we're headed back towards what I think we are good at. And I think that was actually, in a way, a decent decision actually by Levy. And also, just quickly too, the fact that he, and I would say not a lot of clubs seem to do this because they clearly make it quite obvious what maybe team they prefer over the other. But the fact that he made such like a philosophical change in sort of the style of play for both the women's team and as well as the men's team at the same time, he brought in two managers in the same summer that have both been successful outside of the Premier League with some sort of style of play and sort of ethos and philosophy that is more in line with what Tottenham Hotspur fans kind of want to see out there. And we're kind of seeing even that with the women's team right now. They've just put up a much better performance against Chelsea than they have sort of in years. And then also they
Mm.
absolutely smashed, who probably look like they're not doing too well, at Bristol City. But still, like, Spurs seem to just be on all sides of things, from the academy to the women's team as well as to the men's team, are sort of all pushing back in the right direction, playing the style of football that
Mm.
we all sort of fell in love with at this club. And I
Mm.
think that's, in a way, credit to perhaps some decisions that have been made by the hierarchy. Maybe not even Daniel Levy, but Paratici, Scott Munn,
Mm.
whoever's in and
Mm.
around sort of his
Yeah.
board. There, I think for once in the span of 22 years, we've actually now started to make a good decision after another good decision after another good decision, and then you start to actually see the reaps and the rewards of it. Whereas before, maybe what you were bringing up was like he made one good decision, then followed by 4 or 5 bad decisions afterwards, which then just
Yeah.
ultimately bring you back to square one. Pull you back to the beginning. It all just sort of, right. You don't then have these conversations that we're having now about, are Spurs on the right track? Because if you mix up bad
Yeah.
decisions with, good decisions, you're not going to ever have that conversation. But now we are, because I think he has made some good decisions in a row.
What I enjoyed about his performance at the fans forum was when he said that the pressure to appoint the win now managers came from the certain players and the fans, right? He said that, and I laughed a lot because, matey, if you're one of the highest paid CEOs in the Premier League and ever thus, those are the decisions that are on your head. And that if it is any kind of other business, which is not, it's owner run, that's the business of Tottenham, he would have been out on his ear a long time ago. Yeah. And I think what we tend, if you look over the years of each decision that's been made, it's always been a reaction to the previous decision.
Hmm.
Yeah. So you had Redknapp, and Redknapp, old fashioned, and all the rest of it. And then he's just opened his new training ground with his computer screens and his spreadsheets. I know I'll get AVB in
Yeah, football
because he's a
manager.
modern. Yeah, I'll get him in, and then we'll see what we can do there.
The
And
opposite of
then
Harry Redknapp. Yeah.
and then you've got Potts because he was, I think Louis van Gaal was going to sign, and then the United job came up, and there we go. But I think the point is about the Mourinho. So like when I'm not going to change my mind on it, is that when Poch went and Mourinho came in, I was happy with that because I thought that okay, we're going to get a
Yeah,
proper.
you're happy to make that sacrifice.
I was happy to make that sacrifice, but if you're going to have your Mourinho's and your Contes, which as I said just before, going to go toxic. You give them what they want. You don't give them a Jed Spence club signing. You don't give them, and this is sacrilege to the world, the return of Gareth Bale and Joe Rodon and not Skriniar, which is what he wanted. That's what you have to do because they're the win now managers. And this question about the youth and recruiting well and things like that. And the fact of the matter is, Mourinho. I mean, don't forget Mourinho gave Tanganga his debut against Liverpool, and he acquitted himself well. Yeah. So the point is that if you're going to go down that particular route, you've got to actually give them the money and what they want in the here and now, because it's not going to last.
But it sounds
And
like
you've
you're
got
saying
the.
that
Mhm.
Levy is benefiting from just making like the opposite decision from what he made 3 years ago. It's like, well, that didn't work. Let's just do the opposite of what our logic was originally, and that's what he just keeps doing. Just do the opposite
Yeah.
reaction to what you did,
Well,
did
that
last time.
Yeah, that's his modus operandi. Yeah, because if you look at it, that's how it works, right? And our very good friend
Pendulum
caller from the
swing.
cheese room.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Our very good friend caller from the cheese room. I do remember him once. I think, and I hope I don't misquote you here, that when he got rid of Nuno and Conte was coming in, he goes, "You've got to hand it to Levy. When he realizes he makes a mistake, he acts on it very quickly." And I was thinking, well, that's a lot of mistakes that someone's made. I mean, it basically praising someone for screwing up and sorting it out very quickly again, and then he repeats and repeats, right? And so Levy reacts to the situation. So the fans are booing, people aren't happy, the football's boring, it's gone toxic. So what's he going to do? He'll obviously, like we would all do what the opposite is. I want Tottenham playing the football that we're known for. I would argue whether he ever knows what that is anyway. And then I'll bring in the last choice Australian who is coming in. And I think it's interesting the Ange relationship with him because I think Levy's point of view, he thinks he's doing Ange a big favour by giving him this big chance. But Ange's got nothing to lose here,
No.
right? Nothing. So let's say he does 2 to 3 years at Tottenham. He gets us in the Europa from eighth. He may get us in the Champions League. We don't ultimately back him, which will be the usual story, of course. He goes in 2 to 3 years' time, around November time. He's at 60 then, and he's going, look, he's established himself in the Premier League. Even in a short period of time, he's not looked out of his depth. So this is a great opportunity for him.
I think it certainly is, and I enjoyed
Mm.
this conversation. We'll see if more good decisions seem to come our way, and whether we can continue to avoid, the crisis conversation, because that's where this sort of came from originally. Is I remember just around this stage, last season, yeah, we started to
Yeah.
see, sort of the crumblings of that Antonio Conte's side, and then a few months down the road
Mm-hmm.
from there, we were saying Spurs are now in crisis, and now 6 months later, we're saying we're back on the right track, or at least I am saying that. I think David Harris maybe gave a bit more of a nuanced sort of answer to it, which I did appreciate. But please give yourself a plug, Mr. Dave Harris. Anything coming up on the cheese room?
Yeah. Well, actually, Cheese Room's on Friday night UK
I'll be there.
time. I do believe you're going to be there. We are going to have the return of the legendary and famous Sacred Cow, where what happens in Sacred Cow is that we'll put up somebody who someone argues 2 minutes in favour of and someone argues 2 minutes against. Word on the street from my booking agent, the choices will be Paratici, which I think you and I will be going at, and also Mr. Danish Flappy Hands, Pierre Emil Hoiberg. So
My
we're on nine
specialties.
o'clock. There you go, 9 o'clock Friday night. Tune in, and I think we'll be having in the background somewhere England v Australia as well.
Nice one. Well, everybody, if you can for me, do smash that like button. Do thank the other David Harris. There is, in fact, another one down under that can replace my very own on this channel in the comments down below. Keep getting your comments in if any stage you disagreed with me or Dave Harris, and we'll be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. We never stop. See everybody.